If I say that there's only two genders, does this fact constitute hate speech nowadays? After all, I am speaking against the authoritarian gender ideology that's being pushed on children right now. My disagreement with the agenda and with the attempts to socially engineer society is a form of political dissent in their eyes. As George Orwell has said, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Only the worst ideas require censorship in order for them to be maintained and adopted. Political correctness will become the vehicle by which this happens because it encourages self-censorship and the acquiescence of society at large. Postmodernists spend a great deal of time deconstructing and challenging facts, and therefore denying reality. A lot of people seem to be sleepwalking through this debate right now. They think the gender issue we're having right now is a minor issue, or that it's some kind of important progressive human rights milestone to be achieved. If we begin to say that gender isn't real or that biology is irrelevant, then everything else we know to be scientifically, objectively, and demonstrably true is now open to being forcibly denied in the same way as the gender issue. The problem really is that debate is not allowed. The regressive left will not hear of any arguments against their position. The Western world is at a crossroads here. We're either going to move forward as an enlightened, scientifically informed, technologically advanced, and genuinely liberal society in the classical sense, or we're going to give way to dogma, superstition, authoritarianism, and identitarian ideology. Another component of this growing problem is that progressive governments seem more concerned with maintaining power than upholding principles and values. The truth is of secondary concern when it comes to canvassing for votes, of course. So the loudest minority of social justice activists will be listened to by politicians, especially if there's an opportunity provided to them to virtue signal. The denial of differentiation between people, be it based upon ability, skill, gender, or personality, is a crucial component of most utopian philosophies such as communism. To achieve equality of outcome, you must lower everyone down to the lowest common denominator, and the current wave of cultural Marxist indoctrination is doing just that in universities and schools. Meritocracy must be challenged as much as the reality of gender or brain sex differences, because these things highlight differences between people, real differences. As capitalism is built upon competition and merit, it therefore doesn't produce the same outcome for someone who either lacks the necessary talent to achieve or couldn't be bothered trying with a person who works hard. So obviously capitalism must be seen as a discriminating supervillain to be overthrown. Those gender studies ideologues couldn't care less about transgender people. What they need is to use identity politics to perpetuate the victim and outrage culture necessary in order for their agenda to be unchallenged. They wish to use trans people to push the anti-science, reality-denying claim that gender doesn't exist, something that transgender people do not actually believe. So why do gender ideologues do this? Well, simply to remove genuine diversity between men and women so as to make people more infinitely malleable and modifiable, as Jordan Peterson has stated. That's exactly what it takes to produce a Marxist utopia. Break people of their humanity through indoctrination. This is an article from 2014. School told to call kids purple penguins because boys and girls is not inclusive to transgender. Again, this is a smokescreen. Gender ideologues complaining on behalf of all transgender people in order to force conformity to a genderless view of the world. Nebraska teachers are instructed to ask students what their preferred pronouns are. A Nebraska school district has instructed its teachers to stop referring to students by gendered expressions such as boys and girls and use gender-inclusive ones such as purple penguins instead. Don't use phrases such as boys and girls, you guys, ladies and gentlemen, and similarly gendered expressions to get kids' attention, instructs a training document given to middle school teachers at the Lincoln Public Schools. We've recently seen the Transport Authority of London pushing something similar. Ladies and gentlemen will no longer be used in public announcements over the PA system in order to be more inclusive, apparently. Create classroom names and then ask all of the purple penguins to meet on the rug, it advises. Purple penguins? Why not just call them comrades already? Always ask yourself, will this configuration create a gendered space, the document says. Look at how this assumption here is that gender differences are considered to be a negative. This brainwashing is an attempt to emotionally and psychologically strip people of their innate human inclinations and impulses. I find it very disturbing. The instructions were part of a list called 12 Steps on the Way to Gender Inclusiveness, developed by Gender Spectrum, an organization that provides education, training, and support to help create a gender-sensitive and inclusive environment for children of all ages. Sensitive and inclusive, nice-sounding words, just like the Safer Schools program in Australia. You wrap your agenda in a Trojan horse and parents will never see the abuse coming. Other options on the list include asking all students about their preferred pronouns and decorating the classroom with all genders welcome door hangers. If teachers still find it necessary to mention that genders exist at all, the document states they must list them as boy, girl, both, or neither. Furthermore, it instructs teachers to interfere and interrupt if they ever hear a student talking about gender in terms of boys and girls, so the student can learn that this is wrong. Wow. Room 101, folks. 2 + 2 = 5, as we know. How many lights do you see?
Oh! 4 lights!
There are 4 lights, yeah. Actually, there's 5. Sorry, time for another electric shock. They're experimenting on your kids. Just thought I'd let you know. Point out and inquire when you hear others referencing gender in a binary manner, it states. Ask things like, what makes you say that? I think of it a little differently. I don't care what you think, there's only 2, and kids are able to understand this. It takes an ideology to break kids of the common sense that actually comes naturally to them. Provide counter-narratives that challenge students to think more expansively about their notions of gender. And by expansively, you mean incorrectly, right? The teachers were also given a handout created by the Center for Gender Sanity, Jesus, that's ironic, which explains to them that gender identity can't be observed or measured, only reported by the individual. So in other words, make it subjective. And an infographic called The Genderbread Person. You've probably seen that before, and there's a link to the website. Interesting, if you actually notice here, that they'll never be able to point to gender fluidity or non-binary nonsense when it comes to the animal kingdom and our nearest primate kin. I mean, it must exist there if it exists in humans, right? This is because their politically motivated pseudoscience only extends to humans, meaning it has no basis in nature and therefore no basis in reality. Bill 89 in Canada will permit the state to seize your child if you do not proceed with providing hormone therapy to help them transition to the opposite gender. And yet apparently there are no genders. In the US, a mom has lost a lawsuit against a school that secretly gave her son transgender treatment. St. Paul, Minnesota, May 26, 2017, LifeSite News. A mother's lawsuit against a Minnesota school system for secretly helping her 15-year-old son transition to female was dismissed by a federal judge. Anne-Marie Calgaro of Iron Junction discovered all too late last year that her son's school was secretly giving him female hormone treatments with funding from the government. She sued the school district, the county health board, and a local healthcare entity for violating her rights as a parent. But the school countered that the boy was emancipated from his mother because he had been living on his own and was therefore legally able to make his own medical decisions. Remember that the idea of there being genders is a divisive concept to utopian Marxists, so you have to ensure there are no divisions within society. This means that all male singing groups in universities must now admit anyone regardless of their gender identity, otherwise you're discriminating. UK Conservative government will allow people to choose their gender without medical examination. I'm sure this won't be a problem when it comes to bathroom usage or anything. The UK Conservative government has announced plans to allow adults to change their gender legally without medical examination. Under the proposals, people would be able to identify themselves as an opposite gender and have their birth certificates changed to match their desired gender, the Times reported. The Gender Recognition Bill would change existing laws on gender identity, including the rule that asks people to live 2 years as their chosen gender before they can formally change their sex in official documents like their birth certificate. The bill would also tear up the requirement to get a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria before being allowed to officially change gender. Well, of course, I expect these limitations to be removed because the regressive left will see any medical recommendations like these as a form of bigotry. These guidelines were designed to ensure that patients were making informed decisions by taking their time and undergoing psychological evaluation. Now, all of this is being thrown out. The new proposals, however, have been criticized, with some suggesting that allowing people to self-identify as a different gender could result in multiple legal cases over access to gender-specific facilities such as hospital wards, prisons, changing rooms, and sporting events. Stephanie Davis-Ari of Transgender Trend Group warned that if the new bill is adopted, it will have massive implications for women. There will be legal cases. The most worrying thing is that if any man can identify as a woman with no tests and gain access to spaces where women might be getting undressed or feel vulnerable, like women's hospital wards, refuges, and rape crisis centre, women will stop going to these facilities, she said. Religious groups also criticised the new bill, suggesting the government and political leaders are out of touch for focusing on issues that don't concern the ordinary people. It is worrying when the leaders of the main political parties are so out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people, Simon Calvert of the Christian Institute said. Allowing men to self-identify as female without any medical diagnosis allows them to invade the privacy of women and girls. It's time for a reality check. Some things can't be changed. May and Corbyn want to elevate the principle of gender self-declaration, but it is wrong. It is anti-scientific and it is dangerous. By removing reasonable medical processes within gender therapy and eliminating male and female segregation when it comes to gender-specific facilities and resources like toilets, prisons, hospitals, private and public organizations such as the aforementioned singing groups, or even insurance, for example, whatever divisions once existed between men and women for practical, necessary, and very obvious reasons, there's an attempt being made to undermine gender dynamics, deny biological reality, and push conformity to a Marxist utopian worldview. This thinking is the beginning of the old familiar slippery slope towards the belief that we'll all be equal, but first we have to eliminate all the things that clearly demonstrate how different we actually are. The communist utopia will only be made possible once people have embraced the notion of equity, equality of outcome, the belief that we all deserve the same rewards, the same earnings, that competition is bad because it highlights the fact that some people are better at certain things than others, some people are faster, stronger, more intelligent, more talented, some people work harder.